All right, so we're going to get into 2.4, the very end of it. There's one thing I did not talk about on Friday, so I want to show you this one topic. It should not take very long. The homework only has a few problems on it, um, but this is factoring the sum of two perfect squares. So if you recall, there were two things from Friday that I really needed you to know. I needed you to know that the square root of -1 is equal to I, and that I squared is equal to -1. Like, we will never have either of these two as our final answer because I can always replace them. So if you recall back the difference of two perfect squares, difference of two perfect squares, and we factored them. So there were problems that looked like this: x squared minus 81. And I asked you to factor this. This factors to x, and one is a plus and one is a minus, and then you take the square root of this number, which is 9 and 9. So this would factor to x plus 9, x minus 9. Like, that's how we do it. That's how it's factored. Well, the sum of two perfect squares, first of all, what does sum mean? It means addition. So the sum, so I'd have a problem that looks like this: x squared plus 81. So if I asked you to factor this, it factors the same exact way, except instead of putting a 9 and a 9, I put 9i and minus 9i. So this would factor to x plus 9i, x minus 9i. And again, great questions are, well, where'd I get the x from? Well, I took the square root of x squared, right? X squared, that was x and x. Where'd I get the 9 from? Well, the square root of 81 is 9 and 9. And why did I put an I here? Because this is the sum. So if you see the sum of two perfect squares, it can always be factored this way. And again, the reason that this works is if I were to FOIL this out, I would get x squared. My outer would give me minus 9ix. My inner would give me plus 9ix. I know that looks ugly, but look what happens. They cancel. And then the last two terms would give me a minus 81i squared. So my middle terms cancel, and I'm left with x squared minus 81i squared. Well, I just said we never leave I squared in part of my answer because I can replace it with a -1. So it'd be x squared minus 81 times -1. I can multiply those two numbers and it gives me x squared plus 81. So that's why the sum of two perfect squares works. So we're going to go through a few problems here, a couple problems that look like homework, and then just do one problem from a refresher that was from Friday. So this problem right here is asking me to find the factored form of the expression. Well, if you notice, this 3 and this 75 are not perfect squares, but I can take out a GCF. I can take a 3 out of both of these numbers, and it leaves me with 3 times x squared plus 25. Well, this x squared plus 25 is the sum of two perfect squares. That would be x plus 5i, x minus 5i. Okay, so I could go ahead and factor that. So you're going to have like 4 or 5 problems like this where you have to take a GCF out first, and then when you take the GCF out, it will be the sum of two perfect squares. Again, where did I get the x from? Took the square root of x squared. Where did I get the 5 from? Took the square root of 25, and then I put an I afterwards because it's the sum of two perfect squares. Now, if it's asking you to solve by using factoring, okay, I have the same exact type of problem. I've got x squared plus 4 is equal to 0. Well, this is the sum of two perfect squares. So I could factor this as x plus 2i, x minus 2i. And then now I can use the zero product property, which we talked about earlier in 2.4, which is setting each one of these factors equal to 0 and solving. So I'm going to subtract 2i. 0 minus 2i is a negative 2i. Add 2i, 0 plus 2i is a positive 2i. So my two solutions are negative 2i and positive 2i. Now, if I went to put this into Desmos, it would not work. These are called imaginary solutions. They don't actually cross the x-axis when we graph them. So you have to make sure that you are paying attention. If it has an equal sign, I expect you to use the zero product property and solve. Okay, so Here's another problem. So this goes back to what we did on Friday. And it looks like for the most part, those of you that watched the video were able to use the calculator and solve those. I didn't want that to be a too difficult of a homework assignment. If you didn't get that done, you need to make sure that you do that. But this one, this is not the sum of two squares because 20 is not a perfect square. So this goes back to what we did Friday. What did we do Friday? We got the x squared by itself. So I've got x squared equals negative 20. And then now I take the square root of both sides, and that gives me x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1, the square root of 20. So now I'm going to write it as plus or minus square root of negative 1. I'm looking for a perfect square factor in 20. That would be the square root of 4, square root of 5. So I've got x is equal to plus or minus these two reduced to 2i. I can't do anything with the square root of 5, so I leave it like that. And there are my two solutions. Okay, I'm saying 2 because plus or minus. Positive 2i squared of 5, negative 2i squared of 5. Okay. Um, Another problem here where it's an equal sign, so I can factor out a 2. It leaves me with x squared plus 81. You need to recognize that that is the sum of two perfect squares, so it's 2x plus 9i, x minus 9i. And then now I set any factor that has an x equal to 0. This does not have an x, so I leave it alone. So x plus 9i equals 0, x minus 9i equals 0. I'm going to subtract the 9i. I get x is equal to negative 9i. I'm going to add the 9i. X is equal to positive 9i. So here are my two solutions for that. And the last type of problem is one that involves just variables. Again, this is the sum of two perfect squares. X squared is a perfect square, y squared is a perfect square, and there's a plus. So this just simply factors to x plus yi, x minus yi. So again, know where I'm getting the yi from. Y squared, if I take the square root of it, it's just equal to y. There's an I because this is the sum of two perfect squares. So do me a favor, do the few problems that I have assigned on Savas for you. And if you have not done the homework assignments from 2.4, you should have plenty of time to get them done in class today. If you have any questions, we will go over them next Monday. I will go over all of 2.4, anything that you're not sure of. But if you don't do the problems or take the notes, I can't help you. Um, so make sure that you take the time today to watch the videos and do that. And also, if you have quiz corrections, set them up here on my desk. There's a pile on my desk. Put the quiz corrections on my desk. Make sure your name is on them. All right. Have a great day.